The roar of the storm filled the wooden decks as sailors clung to rigging, their faces streaked with salt and fear. Below, the cramped cabins echoed with the creak of swelling planks and worried whispers. These brave souls, driven by dreams of gold, spices, and uncharted lands, faced the merciless vastness of the Atlantic, their lives a fragile thread woven into the fabric of history. Every navigation relied on stars and whispers of faith, while the ship fought to stay afloat amid relentless waves and howling winds. Behind the scenes, secret codes and signals kept the ship's mission alive. Silent language in a world of danger and discovery. It's a story of human resilience against the fury of nature. If you're fascinated by these daring journeys and want to explore more, subscribe and hit 3,000 followers. Let us know where you're watching from and drop a ship emoji if you're ready to sail into history with us. You ever wonder what it felt like to be crammed inside a wooden ship, miles away from land, with the freezing wind whipping your face and the salty spray stinging your eyes? Imagine the smell of wet hemp, the creak of aging planks under your feet, and the bitter taste of fear and hope mixing in your mouth. It's a visceral experience, and today we're diving into that world. The gritty reality of the age of exploration between the 15th and 18th centuries. Back then, ships like caravels, galleons, and Norse weren't just vessels. They were floating stories of human resilience. They carried explorers chasing dreams of gold, spices, and new worlds, but also carried the heavy burden of survival against the relentless power of nature. The construction of these ships was a marvel in itself. Wooden planks from 2,000 trees, carefully joined using iron nails and tree nails, formed structures that could weather storms and long voyages. Oak and pine were the staples, oak for strength, pine for flexibility. The design was simple yet effective, a hull shaped to cut through waves, a high stern for visibility and defense, and a sleek bow that sliced the water. Life aboard was a brutal test of endurance. The crew hierarchy was strict, captains at the top, then pilots, masters, and sailors at the bottom. Every one of them had a role, but all shared the same grim reality. The ship was a moving prison. Routines were brutal, starting at dawn with chores, mending sails, scrubbing decks, checking rigging. Conditions could turn lethal in an instant. Cold, wet, and cramped, sailors fought constant battles with scurvy, dysentery, and frostbite. Imagine the dread at night. Darkness thick with the smell of damp wood and rotting food, punctuated only by the creaking of the hull and distant thunderstorms. Surviving at sea meant mastering technical skills. Navigation was rudimentary. Astrolabes, compasses, and dead reckoning. Sailors often relied on stars, but cloudy nights could throw them off course. They built their ships with watertight compartments, but a single breach could doom the entire crew. When storms hit, sailors clung to the rigging, cold steel slicing through the air, water flooding the decks. A ship could be lost in minutes, destroyed by wind, rocks, or unseen reefs. Food was a constant concern. Salted pork, dried beans, hardtack. Their diet was basic and often spoiled. The worst enemy wasn't just the storm, but disease. Scurvy killed roughly 20% of sailors on long voyages due to vitamin C deficiency. Living conditions were so cramped that disease spread rapidly. Imagine the despair of seeing friends wasting away, their faces gaunt and eyes dull, while you fought to stay alive. Amidst all this, the crew's mental state was tested daily. The vast emptiness, the relentless cold, the constant danger. These ships weren't just journeys of discovery, they were tests of human willpower. Yet, amid suffering, stories of heroism, camaraderie, and human spirit emerged. When the ship faced disaster, sailors used ingenuity, bailing water, patching sails with torn cloth, improvising tools from scraps. Now, as we explore this history, we also encounter the secret codes they used, hidden messages, signals, or markings on the ship's logs. These codes were vital. They protected valuables, concealed strategic info, and kept pirates at bay. Some were simple, like using knots in ropes or flags to send messages. Others, more complex, perhaps involving ciphered writings on logs or secret signals between ships. Imagine the tension on deck when a sailor was caught trying to decode a message or hide a secret, risking punishment or worse. The human stories here are powerful. Think about the sailors who faced the cold, the storms, and their own fears. Many of them never saw land again. Their bodies, weathered and scarred, lie beneath the ocean's surface, silent witnesses to a daring age. Yet their resilience and ingenuity paved the way for humanity's greatest adventures, discoveries that reshaped the world. So, the next time you hear about explorers like Columbus or Magellan, remember the human cost behind those stories. The ships were more than vessels. They were symbols of hope, suffering, and the incredible capacity of people to endure the impossible. The brave sailors built their ships from nature's gifts, braved the storms, faced disease, and navigated by stars. Humanity's early quest for new horizons. This is the gritty, human side of the age of exploration that set the stage for our interconnected world. Can you imagine what it feels like to be crammed into a tiny, creaking wooden box, salt spray stinging your face, wind howling like a banshee through the sails, the air thick with the stench of sweat, vomit, rot, and the bitter tang of dried blood, your skin chafed and raw from constant salt and wind, fingers numb from the cold, gums bleeding because your teeth are loosening. Your stomach twists and turns, trying to process the endless wave of seasickness as the boat lurches beneath you. The cold is relentless, slicing into your bones like 1,000 tiny knives. You can even taste the salty brine on your tongue, feeling the gritty wood of the deck under your bare feet. Today, we're diving into that gritty, visceral world of the age of exploration. We're going to uncover what life was really like aboard those long, dangerous voyages across uncharted oceans. If you love stories about human resilience, maritime adventure, and survival against all odds, you're in the right spot. And hey, if you enjoy these deep dives into history, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps keep this channel afloat. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. So picture the era from the late 1400s to the early 1700s, the great age of sailing ships, caravels, galleons, and frigates, pushing out into the vast, unpredictable Atlantic and Pacific. These ships weren't just vessels, they were floating prisons. Crew members, often pressed into service, packed together in cramped, dark holds. Imagine over 100 men crammed into a space no larger than a small apartment, with barely room to stretch, the air thick with the smell of mold, rotting food, and human waste. Disease spread like wildfire. Scurvy, dysentery, measles, and mortality rates soared. More than 20% of crews didn't make it home, succumbing to storms, starvation, or sickness. But it wasn't just the sea that threatened their survival. The ships themselves were fragile, like giant wooden bones constantly battered by wind, rain, and waves. They carried precious cargo, gold, spices, silk, things that could make or break empires. Yet, the journey was a nightmare of physical and mental torment. Imagine being on watch at midnight, the cold wind slicing through your thin clothes, the waves crashing violently against the hull, making the entire ship shudder. Your hands are numb, your eyes strain into the darkness, trying to spot trouble ahead. And when trouble came, it was cruel. Storms could tear the sails apart, throwing sailors into the icy sea, where many would drown or be eaten by sharks. But it was not only the weather that tested them. There were pirates lurking, hungry for plunder. Navigating without modern instruments was like trying to find your way in a maze with no map. They used the stars, the sun, and a few crude tools, the astrolabe, the cross-staff, and the compass, little compared to today's GPS. Still, the sea was unforgiving. A miscalculation could send the ship running aground on a hidden reef, breaking apart in seconds. And then there was the cargo. Imagine a cargo hold packed with up to 2,000 trees of precious cedar and oak, all meticulously stacked. But over time, the wood would swell, crack, and rot. Rats and insects would devour supplies, and mold or lava would take hold in the damp dark. Eager sailors sometimes ate spoiled or rotten food just to survive, risking death from poisoning or infection. And if scurvy struck, a common scourge, their gums would bleed, their teeth fall out, and their strength would fade. The pain was relentless, gnawing at their bodies and minds. But here's the thing that often gets overlooked. These sailors weren't just victims of nature, they were survivors, innovators of survival techniques. They learned to ration their water, ferment fruits to stave off scurvy, and even rig makeshift sails with torn cloth when the main sails were shredded. They carried secret tools, coded maps, hidden compartments, and even strange symbols. designed to keep their secrets safe from enemies and mutineers. Some ships carried special codes, up to 15 secret signals, used to communicate danger, mutiny, or surrender. Imagine the secret whispers, the coded messages scrawled in battered journals, hidden away in the captain's cabin, all to keep their fragile lives afloat. And it wasn't only about physical endurance. The psychological toll was staggering. Imagine being at sea for months on end, no land in sight, the endless horizon, the deafening creak of the wood, the constant threat of disaster. The crew's mental state would fray like old rope. Men would go mad, despairing, hallucinating. Some would drown their fears in drink, others in superstition, praying for divine intervention to save them. Crew members sometimes took on superstitions, believing curses haunted their ships, or that certain symbols protected them. They believed in luck, lucky charms, prayers to saints, anything to keep the nightmares at bay. And yet, despite all this, they kept going, because they had to. The ships, the crew, the cargo, these were links in a chain that would shape history. They carried not just goods, but ideas, languages, and cultures, and they endured because the promise of new worlds, riches, and glory called to them. But that's not all. Sometimes the journey would be interrupted by something even worse. Larvae crawling through the food, mold growing thick on the walls, or a sudden storm that shatters the mast, leaving the crew stranded in the middle of nowhere. And when they finally caught sight of land after weeks, months, even years, the relief was staggering. Just imagine the sight of a distant coast, a promise of safety. Yet that moment was often shadowed by the realization that the sea's dangers weren't over yet. Now if you want to know exactly how they managed to survive, how they built their ships, how they navigated without GPS, I've got a whole video on that. But for now, let's just appreciate the incredible human story. People pushing beyond their limits, fighting nature and despair, all in pursuit of something greater. This was the real face of the age of exploration, not just maps and discoveries, but blood, sweat, tears, and the unbreakable will to survive. The next time you look at a modern cruise ship or a satellite navigation system, remember the brave souls who sailed these treacherous waters centuries ago with nothing but their wits and a prayer. Because, trust me, what they endured was nothing short of miraculous. Imagine you're standing on the deck of a ship in the 16th or 17th century. The air is thick with salt, sweat, and the scent of wood that's been battered by countless storms. The sky above is vast and merciless, the wind slicing through your clothes like a knife. You're part of a crew risking everything. Now picture this. Every day brings a new nightmare, and survival depends on your wits, your crew's resilience, and sometimes mere luck. Life on these ships? It was a relentless grind. And let me tell you, it wasn't just about steering through giant waves or dodging hurricanes. No, the real struggles were hidden in the details, those tiny, deadly problems that could wipe out a crew in a heartbeat. First, think about the ship itself. These vessels were massive, but nowhere near as sturdy as today's ships. They were built from roughly 1,500 to 2,000 oak and pine trees, carefully stacked and sealed with pitch and tar. Despite their size, they were vulnerable. A single leak, a split beam, or a broken mast could threaten the entire voyage. Imagine a crew member, like João from Portugal, trying to patch a crack in the hull at sea with makeshift oakum and hot pitch, knowing that a single misstep could sink them in the dark. And ships, with their complex rigging, often suffered from snapped ropes or fallen masts. Each disaster, a race against time and chance. But it wasn't just the ship's structure that caused trouble. The food was another nightmare. Preserved with salt, smoked, or dried, it wasn't exactly gourmet. Imagine the crew opening a barrel of dried beans, only to find maggots writhing inside, or bread coated in mold so thick you could scrape it off like black tar. These conditions led to scurvy, of course, vitamin C deficiency. Without modern medicine, sailors relied on makeshift remedies, lime juice, lemon, even wild herbs they could find on shore. But sometimes it was too late. Gingivas bleeding, teeth falling out, limbs aching from swelling. It was a slow, cruel death, often taking months, and crew members would die in silence, their bodies tossed into the sea. And yet, it gets worse. The constant dampness, think of damp wood and mold, created a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and larvae. Larvae that crawled through the food, burrowing into bread and meat. It was common for a crew to eat rotten provisions, not knowing that tiny worm-like larvae were feasting alongside them. Can you imagine biting into a piece of bread, feeling a strange squish, and realizing it's infested? The stomach churning, the nausea, the endless vomiting. These larvae weren't just gross. They caused illness, fever, and death in many cases. But wait, there's more. The storms. They weren't just rain and wind. Imagine a thunderous, violent tempest that twists the ship's timbers like paper. Masts shatter, sails rip apart, and the crew scrambles to stay alive. They relied on techniques like reefing sails, folding and tying parts to reduce wind resistance, and patching torn canvas with scraps of sailcloth. Sometimes they'd lash themselves to the rigging to avoid being thrown overboard. Every lightning strike, every crashing wave was a test of human endurance. And when the storm finally subsides, the crew faces another horror, the cold. The freezing Atlantic or Pacific waters could drop temperatures to near freezing. The cold was an assassin invisible to the eye. Hypothermia would set in gradually, shivering, trembling, losing coordination. Men like Miguel, a seasoned sailor from Spain, would cling to the rails, teeth chattering, his muscles trembling so violently that he'd sometimes lose grip and fall into icy water. The rescue, usually impossible. Many crews simply froze or succumbed to exhaustion. Now, how did they survive in such hellish conditions? They became masters of improvisation. When masts snapped, they'd use spare yards, long wooden beams, to replace broken ones. When food ran scarce or spoiled, they'd ration meticulously, sometimes just a handful of dried peas per day. To combat leaks, crews used oakum tangled fibers of hemp and hot pitch to seal cracks. These patches might hold for a few days or weeks, but in the relentless sea they rarely lasted long. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect, how they communicated using secret codes. Imagine a ship's crew in the middle of the Atlantic, miles from land, surrounded by danger. They needed to send messages, but with no radio. How? They developed a series of signals, codes, and symbols, like flags, lantern flashes, or even knots tied in ropes. Speaking of secret codes, some ships used what's called the 15 secret signals, prearranged. Coded gestures or signals to convey warnings or orders, especially when pirates or enemies were near. These signals could tell the crew to brace for battle, prepare to abandon ship, or hide supplies. They were lifesavers in a world where trust was scarce and danger lurked everywhere, and that's not all. To keep track of time and navigation, sailors used the stars, compass, and rudimentary charts, but navigating wasn't easy, especially without GPS. They relied on the sun's position, the North Star, and simple instruments like the astrolabe or quadrant. Imagine a sailor, hundreds of miles from land, staring at a tiny instrument, trying to calculate latitude while battling seasickness. Every day was a gamble, one wrong reading, and they could be miles off course, drifting into disaster. But through all this chaos, one thing emerged clear. These sailors were resilient. They endured brutal weather, sickness, hunger, and despair. And they did it because they believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that land, riches, and glory awaited them. They pushed beyond their physical and mental limits, transforming suffering into survival. They built ships with their own hands, each plank, each dale, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. So next time you see a modern cruise ship gliding smoothly across calm waters, think about those brave souls who sailed centuries ago. They had no GPS, no modern medicine, no instant communication, just rudimentary tools, raw courage, and an unyielding will to reach distant shores. And many of them? They believed they were cursed, haunted, or blessed all at once. Superstitions ran deep. They prayed to saints, carried lucky charms, and whispered prayers in the dark. Yet, despite all the curses they believed in, they kept sailing. Because to them, the promise of new worlds was worth every sacrifice. And that's the real story of the age of exploration, a story of human endurance and ingenuity. It's a saga marked by blood, sweat, tears, and unbreakable hope. A story that reminds us how far we've come and how much we owe to those who dared to face the fury of the sea with nothing but their wits and a prayer. Imagine yourself on the deck of a creaking ship, hundreds of miles from land, under a sky so vast it feels like you're swallowed whole. The salty air bites at your skin, sharp as knives, and every breath tastes like the sea itself. Brine, fish, and something else, something metallic. The wind howls, carrying the cries of seagulls that seem so distant, yet so close they can pierce your bones. Your hands are raw from hours of handling rough ropes. Wooden planks beneath your feet creak like the bones of a dying giant. This was life for sailors navigating the uncharted waters of the colonial era, an era marked not just by discovery, but by secrets, danger, and unimaginable resilience. Now imagine the world of those ships, vast, mysterious, cloaked in silence, broken only by the creak of timber, the slap of water against hull, and the secret whispers of danger lurking beneath. But not everything was spoken aloud. Not everything was in the open. Sailors had their own language, coded signals, secret signs that could mean life or death. These codes weren't just clever tricks. They were lifelines in a dangerous game of survival. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating aspects of that hidden world, the secret communication codes of colonial ships. Back then, a ship's crew was a micro-society, bound together by necessity and superstition. With no radios or satellite phones, they relied on hand signals, flags, and secret codes to communicate. Imagine the tension. Each message could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. You could be miles apart from the enemy, or from your own crew, and still need to pass vital information swiftly and covertly. That's where these secret codes come into play. One of the most famous was the flag signaling system. Think of it as a Morse code of the sea, but with flags instead of lights. They used a series of brightly colored banners, red, black, yellow, blue, white, each with specific meanings. A certain pattern might warn of an approaching storm. Another could signal that the ship's cargo was compromised. But it wasn't always so straightforward. Sailors often used coded arrangements to hide messages from prying eyes, secret signals that could tell allies to prepare for battle or warn enemies of their intentions. But there was more. Sailors also had a set of cipher charts, secret maps with coded symbols. These were like ancient GPS systems, but with symbols, stars, circles, crosses, marked with strange numbers and letters. They could encode the location of hidden treasures or dangerous reefs. Imagine a sailor, poring over a weathered chart, rubbing his finger over symbols that only he understood, deciphering whether the next port held opportunity or peril. And let's not forget the ciphers, complex encryptions that used combinations of numbers, letters, and symbols. These could be as simple as substituting letters for numbers, A01, B2, or as intricate as the famous Visionaire cipher, a code so secret that it took centuries for cryptographers to break. These ciphers were often kept in sealed lockboxes, and the key to deciphering them might be hidden in a sailor's pocket or whispered in a prayer. But the real twist? Some of these codes were so well kept that even today, historians are still uncovering their secrets. They reveal a fascinating human side, a side of sailors who were more than just rough, bearded men battling the elements. They were clever, resourceful, and sometimes downright sneaky. Many crews believed that their secret codes could save them from mutiny, capture, or shipwreck. These clandestine messages could hide strategies, warn about pirates, or even fool the enemy into thinking the ship was somewhere it was not. Now here's where it gets even more intense. Imagine you're a sailor, working in the cramped, dark cargo hold or the dim lantern-lit deck at night. Tired, cold, your hands trembling from the salt and cold. You're clutching a tiny sheet of paper with your secret message, trying to memorize the symbols before dawn. Or perhaps you're on watch, signaling in code, hoping the enemy doesn't catch on. The pressure is immense, because if they find your secret, it's not just your mission that's compromised. It could be your life, your ship, your entire crew. And that's not all. Sometimes these secret signals were a matter of life and death for the crew. Imagine a sailor, his gums bleeding from scurvy, his teeth falling out, yet still clutching his tiny cipher, trying to decipher the message that might save him. The physical toll was brutal. Malnutrition, disease, exhaustion. Mentally, the pressure could crush a man. Every cryptic message was a gamble. Can you trust the code, or is it a trap? The mental strain was staggering. and those who mastered the codes often found themselves a step ahead of danger. But the human stories don't end there. Many sailors endured the agony of betrayal. Caught with secret messages, their careers ended, or worse. Others used codes to hide personal messages, letters to loved ones coded so that no captain or officer could read them. Imagine the desperation, the hope, the tiny sparks of human connection amid the chaos of the sea. Here's the cruel truth. These secret codes, as clever as they were, couldn't save everyone. Many ships sank, many lives lost. Despite the best efforts of their crews, the ocean was an unforgiving teacher. But what these sailors showed, what history remembers, is their unbreakable human spirit. They risked everything for discovery, wealth, and the dawn of a new world. Today we can protect ourselves with technology, encrypted emails, secure messages. Back then, it was raw guts, sweat, and a little bit of magic in the form of secret codes. We should thank those anonymous sailors, those hidden heroes, who, amid storms and betrayal, kept their secrets safe and their hopes alive. So next time you see an old ship's flag fluttering in the breeze, remember the secrets it might hold, hidden messages that sailed beneath the surface, unseen but vital. Think of the human courage behind those coded signals, stories of resilience, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Because history isn't just about dates and rulers, it's about the people, those sailors, those explorers who dared to face the fury of the sea with nothing but their wits and a secret. If you want to dive deeper into how these codes worked, I've got a video down here explaining the nitty-gritty. But for now, just appreciate the incredible resilience of those who sailed centuries ago. Those who faced death in every storm, relied on secret signals, and kept the flame of discovery burning against all odds. Thanks to their sacrifices, we're here today, safe, connected, and able to enjoy the benefits of modern navigation and communication. Let's honor their memory by remembering the human stories behind the ships, the codes, and the sea. And if you enjoyed this journey into the hidden world of colonial maritime secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories from the age of exploration. Because behind every voyage, there's a human story worth telling, a story of courage, resilience, and hope that still echoes across the ages.